again, if I figured it out, I would be sitting on a beach. But I'll tell you kind of how I currently think about it and how we as a firm think about it. So usually at any stage, or specifically at seed stage, we think about three things for the business: people, team, market, product. And then, I think given the seed, product is last, not because product is not important, because product is most of the time not built. So the way I usually think about it is like, first of all, is a market attractive enough, big enough? And then I think about, and I would say some different investors have different debates. Some are like team first. We ignore the market. So like YC, for example, right? I think their strategy is just invest in like impressive people. And out of 200 per batch, a couple of them will work out, a bunch of them will pivot, and they don't care. But because their cost base is so low, right? They buy it at like, $2 million or $2.5 million valuation. I think not looking at market is tricky because it's hard to bank on a pivot. So I think you have to be comfortable enough in the starting position of, is this big of an ocean to swim? Yes, you might not be like at this pier, you might go that pier, but like, is this ocean broadly enough, big enough? I mean, sometimes pivot works. So that's how I think about market. On people, I think it's, generally speaking, I'm looking for lack of better, so a couple of things. One is what I call founder market fit. So what I mean by that is, again, I think about every business is like, what is the superpower you need to have this business be really successful? And that is slightly different. So like, I'll give example of Attentive, which is in our portfolio company, this mobile SMS marketing solution. For that business to be successful, you're not building Google search engine. So the technical solution is probably pretty similar at the end when you have competition. So it's probably about sales and go to market. So like, so then like, do we have a heat-seeking missile at this founding team who we think can just like really out execute everybody at the sales and marketing side of things? And the advantage there is that we actually backed this team previously at a previous company. So it's also the second time NextView founding team. So we knew that we have high confidence in that. And another example, like consumer social app that I worked on, the reason I invested is that this team, so the two guys, they spent a couple years at both Instagram and Facebook. And they're one of those people you talk to. They just study social networks as a mission. And they have like thought through it front and back and sideways. They talk to high school kids, stand in front of NYU, give out pizza to have people like try their stuff. They just have this relentless focus and relevant experience. One of them actually was very early on Instagram, right after the Instagram acquisition, focusing on safety features. And they're building a video app for teenagers. So that's actually pretty important, the sensitivity around that. So like, and I'm like, okay, these are product people. So they can iterate to get to a place where the product will make sense. So I would never invest in something in consumer social without some kind of strong product background. So that's how one thing I think about. Like the superpower is matched to like the particular business model. The other thing I would say is just like, I mean, this is hard to quantify, but it's like the general like exceptionalness. I mean, this sounds a little bit elitist, like, but you meet hundreds of founders and you just know who's like top quartile, who's not, like, because you just see so many of them. And some people just like 5 minutes in conversation are like, I'm not going to invest. Some people 15 minutes in conversation. I mean, I had this meeting the other week. I hate the industry. They're building heart IoT device on nurses, basically body camera on nurses, selling to hospital systems, trying to like get the whales of like $4 or $5 million ACV contracts. Oh my God. They're like pre-launch, tons of technical risk, computer vision, blah, blah, blah. But she is very impressive. She knows her stuff. She knows the hospitals. She knows why she's going to nurses as opposed to doctors. It was a very dynamic conversation. And I basically, yesterday in a partner meeting, I was like, look, guys, I hate this market. We'd never in 10 years invest in anything that needs to sell to hospital because it's a pain. But this founder is very impressive. She has unique insight. The third thing I would call out is you would meet companies and they'll be like, oh, we're building whatever. And I was like, okay, I'm looking for like unique insights, meaning this is not the first time you're tackling this market, or this is not the first time you're working on this problem, but like, what do you have that's like a little different than someone else? Because I think that tells me that like you're going to be executing more smarter. So like on this nursing body camera thing example, she's like, everybody else is working on doctors and audio solution, NLP for like scribing so that we can save time from typing stuff into EMRs. But this is why that's a wrong approach. And this is why I'm doing nurses. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I'm not a healthcare specialist, but like, I was like, first principle, like, okay, that actually makes sense. And then she talked about like why nurses are going to be better in terms of contract, why nurses control a lot more operating budget, and da, 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 da. I mean, to be validated, but at least it's like unique and interesting and different than everything else I've heard in this sector. So I think that's the other thing I would call out. And then the last one is probably pretty standard, is like, you can't, depending on how technical the product is, right? Like you need to have the technical side, you need to have the business side. I think sometimes some other firms will back like really technical research teams without any like commercial nose. We are probably not that, because I would sometimes meet teams like, oh my God, you're too academic. Like I've said no to those town founder, because I was like, you have no idea how to go to market. You're just like, I'm just going to build it. And people will come like, well, that's not usually how it happens. And so I think we are a group that probably needs to see a pretty clear answer, at least hypotheses around, if it's a consumer business, how are you thinking about consumer go-to-market and marketing? And the answer cannot just be, I'm going to buy ads on Facebook because everybody else is doing the exact same thing. And on the B2B side, it's like, where do you start? Why do you think that's the right part of the wedge to go in? And then like kind of get a better quality understanding of how you're thinking about approaching customers, even without a sales pipeline where a pilot's lined up. So